Today, I'm going to kind of get engagement from you virtually. I'm going to use Kahoot. So if you can either on your phone, like sometimes on my phone, I actually, when I'm teaching with Kahoot, I actually log on to Kahoot with my phone because then I understand what the student experience is like because I need to keep an eye on what's happening with the students on Kahoot. So that's what I would suggest. If you do it on your phone, then you can also keep, yeah, go ahead. So you can also, when you do it on your phone, you can keep your computer open and see the faces. And like, I'm seeing Elena there. I don't know what it is, but your face just makes me happy. I don't know. I've been looking at little circles so long that I see actual human faces and you just make me smile. So thank you for that. And I'm seeing Licinia. Is that the way you say your name? Will you?
It's Licinia.
Licinia. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that smile. That is great. And I see Tracy there in her gourmet kitchen. So again, makes me happy. So if you can join Kahoot and you go to either if you the Kahoot app, if you already have it on your phone, or you just go to the web browser kahoot.it, which Kahoot it, which actually I think means Kahoot Italy, but whatever. So I see Tracy in the Kahoot. I'm going to screen share so you can see the way Kahoot works. You get a screen share. You screen share it so that everybody sees what's happening. Like if you were in the room, physical, because I'm sure some of you are teaching actually in the room, you would project it. I also like the idea for hybrid because everybody can join it, right? And your at-home kids can join and you can have the kids in the room. And the other nice thing about Kahoot just announced that they're releasing some of their major best question types have been released to the K-12 subscription. So now you can get access to word cloud and some of the really exciting question types. So we're going to go ahead and get started because I have so much to say about this topic. And this topic is fingernails on the chalkboard. So I don't know about you guys, but I've been teaching a long time. And I somehow in my school district, the kids a lot of them start in kindergarten. If not, they don't start in kindergarten, they start in 6th grade. So when they get to me in high school, they're pretty much smack dab in intermediate, right? And they're intermediate speakers. And they make what we call a lot of errors, right? Like they don't sound good. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. They sound like they say things that they're communicating, but it just doesn't sound native-like. The reason why that's errors or is in quotation marks is because linguists actually don't use the term error. Linguists use the term non-native-like construction. So they say things that communicate, but they don't sound like natives, right? So that's what we're talking about today is how can we improve that situation? And so I'm Paris Granville. I'm the Bellevue School District. I'm in the curriculum department. Most of the time I'm in central office, but there was a budget cut this year. So despite the fact that it's my 3rd language, I'm teaching Spanish 3 this year. And I actually love teaching. Yes, it is being recorded. So I love teaching Spanish 3, but I'm definitely not your best Spanish 3 teacher. I'm well aware of that. So I've had to take a different approach. But most of the time I'm in central office and I support my teachers. Now with me today, I also have my daughter, Capri.
Hi, I'm Capri and I'm a student as of now at Western Washington University, hoping to become a future teacher, language teacher, or ELL teacher. Don't know yet, but we'll see.
Yeah. So yes, I honestly, somehow I converted her into a teacher. So here she is. So that's great. And we're going to start with the word cloud. What language do you teach? This is important because some of we're talking about non-native like constructions. So go ahead. You can, because it helps me understand the type of non-native like errors that students make if I know what your languages are. It looks very different if you teach Chinese, for example, the type of things that errors that people make. Okay, let's see what the languages are on the screen share. Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, so this is Spanish, Espanol, French, and Spanish. Lynn, is that you? Do you teach both still? Okay. Okay, so Lynn and I kind of share that. And then Espanol, especially if you're a native speaker of Spanish, I'm sure you're familiar with what, especially, U.S. people who don't speak two languages, the way they speak Spanish at the intermediate level, you're very familiar with it. And then Japanese. Okay, so that's good. This is and Mandarin Chinese. So that is great to know because that'll help us moving forward. And since I only teach Spanish and French, I'm going to need, if you teach one of these other languages, I'm going to need you to activate your brain, kind of generate do the heavy lifting on, okay, so what does this look like in my language? All right. So we're going to do a quick quiz about what intermediate learners look like because there's some surprises there. All right, quiz, and it's quick. What is the most error-prone proficiency level? Like at what level do kids sound the worst from a accuracy standpoint? I'm not going to tell you. You got to guess. Okay. You're a student. You can do it. Just guess. It's okay if you get it wrong. 10 seconds. By the way, if you have Kahoot, I don't know if you know, you can change the music style. I used the 80s music on Friday when I was teaching. The kids were like really digging the 80s style Kahoot music. Yes, that is right. It is very surprising, but intermediate students sound worse, much worse than novice students. And which brings us to the next. Oh, Tracy is in the lead. That's right. She's in the lead. So now that begs the question, or like the follow-up question is, why do novice speakers sound better than intermediate speakers? Okay. I'm not going to speak. I think there's many reasons. We got 7 answers. And how many people? Okay, we'll wait a little longer.
Answer it for an
Yeah, we're up to 9 answers.
Looking forward to seeing them.
Yeah. All right. Here we go. 9 answers submitted. Wow. There's some really interesting ones. Really interesting because they speak more. Yes, because when you're a novice, they're just using one words, okay? Oh yeah, that's actually, remember we think of the novice level as the parrot level, so they repeat memorized words and phrases. They attempt to use more complex structures without maybe necessarily having native-like structures in place. Oh yeah, novices, they just have less language to make mistakes with, right? Yeah. Yeah, wow, you guys are already proficiency experts. That's super awesome. This was actually done from a study, actually published in the, it was quick question. What proficiency level are most teachers in the US? intermediate. And I know that's surprising, but this is starting to change as states are requiring people to get certified in my state. You have to be at advanced low to get certified to teach. And I'm not going to lie, some of my colleagues and me, we struggle to get to advanced low. All right, so how's the leader? Lynn, you've taken the lead. Moving up, so is Elena. All right, next quiz. At what level do speakers start to use native-like structures in spontaneous conversation? So in interpersonal speaking.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's a hard question. Yeah. Advanced. And remember, the advanced is the storyteller, the person who can tell a story, navigate timeframes start to navigate timeframes with ease. But the spy, the person who can pass for a native, is only the superior, right? And very few of our students actually get to superior. So advanced. Most of us have intermediate speakers, unless we have heritage or immersion kids. And even them, like in my district, not even every single immersion kid or DL kid gets to advanced. It's like the elite few that get up there to advanced. Oh, Elena's on fire. Okay, so I want you to take a look at this indicator. Capri, will you read this can-do statement?
Oh, yes. I can exchange preferences, feelings, or opinions and provide basic advice on a variety of familiar topics, creating sentences and series of sentences and asking a variety of follow-up questions.
So if that's just one of the three big can-do statements for intermediate. So if you're looking for that in your students, what's some things you would look for? Just, I think with this size of a group, you can unmute and speak. Like, what would you look for in an intermediate?
All right, I will volunteer something. When they do provide advice, it should match the problem that was stated to like show that they indicate that, they understood the problem. And that was on my mind because this week with my Japanese 3 students, they had a little listening where they were supposed to provide advice for the problem. And some of them were saying things like, you should drink more water. And the problem was that the person didn't have enough time to do their schoolwork, but also didn't want to quit their job. So right. You should drink more water. It's like, well, you are giving advice, but you're not indicating that you understand what the situation is. So I would say making sure that their utterances match the situation, that indicate that they understand what they're responding to.
Yeah, because that kind of generic advice is kind of a novice level performance, right? Because it's just very generic. And one of the things we are looking for in intermediates is more precision of language. It still is very vague compared to an advanced speaker, but for sure, that's a great example. But that also leads to the next question. What don't you see in this can-do statement? What's not there?
I'm not seeing any grammar things that you need to be able to conjugate verbs correctly. I mean, obviously you do, but it's not specific.
Yeah, Lynn, right. Yeah, it's not exactly, and as Paul Sandrock has said in the trainings he's done for our state, the way you tell if a kid can meet this can-do statement is if they can meet it at the bare minimum level. Like when it says compare, when it doesn't necessarily mean using a comparative structure, it means, well, I do this and you do that. Like that's a comparison at the very lowest level. So, and kids struggle with this for sure. Capri and I are going to simulate a conversation that actually happened in my class. We're going to simulate it in English so that you can kind of see what intermediates do. And shout out to Wayside Publishing. We're piloting, and they actually sponsor this time slot, Wayside. But one of the things we're noticing about their product is that they have a lot of meaning-based activities, which is actually empowering students to talk more. So here we go. We're going to simulate the conversation. Hello, Capri. Why are sustainable communities important?
For the future content.
Content?
Happy.
Future happiness. What do you do to contribute to a sustainable community?
Like to help planet with recycling. What about you? What do you recycle?
I recycle paper. Yes, recycling is important. What does your family recycle?
Recycle the plastic, the paper, the glass.
Who takes out the recycling in your family?
I throw out the recycling.
Okay, so good intermediate conversation. Is anybody going to think she's a native? No, it's not native-like, but it communicates. So now here's the open-ended question. We're only going to spend a few, like 60 seconds on this. Like, what did you hear in this conversation? All right, I'm going to skip ahead, see the answers. Throw up recycling instead of out. Yeah, lack of small words. Yeah, partial comprehension, lack of clarity, logic, incorrect usage of verbs. Yeah, right. So there's a lot going on there in the intermediate that makes it sound super messy. So we're going to go back. I'm going to go through this really quick. This is 60 seconds of a 6-hour training. So I'm going to condense 6 hours of training into 60 seconds. Here we go. Just a refresh. In order for this to happen in the brain, many comprehension events have to happen. And the tricky bit is about this is it has to be meaning-based, many meaning-based comprehension events. So the reason why is that they have to link the form of the word to the meaning, and that has to happen over time. And also with the intermediate brain, there's this processing overload that happens where they can only hook on to the meaning-based words, and then the little words just go away. And that can cause comprehension misunderstandings, and also it also makes them sound like less native-like. The other thing is that the structure stored in the brain, even for native speakers, is not the way it's presented in the textbooks. And so that creates this mismatch of us trying to stuff it in their brain and it not going in their brain. And so all the strategies I have are trying to keep this in mind that I'm going to share. So the next question I have is like, why would we focus on interpersonal speaking, or as I say in common language, spontaneous conversation? I'll tell you why I focus on interpersonal speaking is because it's the only way I know what is in their brain. Because if I have them write something, even if it's a quick write, I have tools now so I can tell if they copy and pasted it. So I have tools now to get a quick write out of them that I know is in their head. But if they can use it in their spontaneous conversation, they can write it usually, with a little bit of spelling help. But for me, and for many of my teachers, actually, when we went to all remote learning, they were like, I'm just going to focus on spontaneous speaking because that's how I can tell what they've actually acquired. How about you, though? Why would you focus on spontaneous speaking? And, or just like, what's your, why is it a focus? And it's super hard. I'm a full remote teacher all year. So I'm not going to lie. I have had to put up all the stops to get them to do the spontaneous speaking. It's actually 55% of their grade. And because I'm trying to message to them how important that skill is. And they're actually used to it now. Like they know that we have to talk. They know that that's really what I care about. So let's see what we got here from you guys. Oh gosh. Yeah, wow. You guys said this much better than I did. I really like it. Students want to talk to one another. They do. They want us to force them to turn their cameras on, but they don't want to turn the cameras on. And then I know, and then we're talking about going back in secondary, like what would that look like? Because we'll probably get stuck with the broadcast model. So we'll be teaching half the kids in the room and half the kids at home, thinking about what that spontaneous is real life. Get used to them thinking on their, wow, this is really good. Get them used to thinking on their feet to suss out what you need to do to practice. Familiar with the reflex level. Yeah. It's really a check for comprehension for sure. Yeah, you guys, we have some big limitations though. And don't want to focus on them, but we need to keep them in mind. So one of the problems with structures is that the research has shown that the drills actually don't get them into their brain. Like a lot of times the kids can regurgitate in the drill format, but it doesn't actually make it into their spontaneous speaking. Like a kid can fill out the grammar exercise, but when they speak, it's all in infinitives, right? So if you look at the research, I spent a lot of time looking at research, basically focusing on the input piece, getting them to understand and connect to the structure is actually how we get it into their brain. And because the truth is, it's always like throwing Jello at a tree. Like I can give them the structure so the cows come home. Like I can teach them the rule for feminine and masculine, and they still make the error. They still make error. No matter how many times I teach them the rule, it's not acquired. And since especially articles like the in Latin languages, super easy to explain. Last thing to be acquired. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it definitely has to be a balance on the output. You're definitely right. I agree. And what I've had to scroll back, like I thought my kids were ready to do the spontaneous speaking. I realized they hadn't acquired enough language, so I had to scroll back and go back to like next week, I'm going to have to go back to the input. So it's definitely a balancing act. All right. Here's an example that I get from my students. The students don't change the word, okay? They don't conjugate the verb, or they don't, like sometimes there's this combination of articles, like in Spanish or French, like du instead of de, le, right? So they don't change the word form. So just to keep, and so this is an example here in Spanish, the kids will say, yo, who got a basketball? Okay, great. But, you sound like Cookie Monster when you say that. Yes, yo gusto, for sure. Wow, I'm seeing lots of great ideas coming in the chat too, to help us with this. Okay, yeah, I'm seeing, yes, in Japanese and English, word order often reversed. Okay, so this is coming out. Yeah, right. So we see this a lot, I think. And I'm also seeing a lot of expertise come in the chat. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. So I think we're all kind of struggling with this, kind of playing with it, especially now with our time being cut back because we're not seeing our kids as often. So something I'm thinking about is if we could continue the conversation after this, if we could have a support group around this, it might be interesting because I'm struggling with this on a weekly basis. So here's one thing that I've done, and this is, you guys have suggested this in the chat, so we're definitely on the same page. And that is just, I look at the can-do statement and I just boil it down to the very essential. Like I can discuss what I do for fun after school. That's like a novice one, but I have similar ones for intermediate, is I just do the essential. Just like I don't, I set it up for them with the sentence stem and give them the essential, right? Also, I pre-conjugate any verbs for them. Like, I don't expect them to go through the process. It slows it down too much when they have to like, okay, I'm going to say something and then I have to conjugate it. So I just give it to them. I just pre-conjugate it for them so they do the right one. And let me show you what I mean. I have an example. So this is an example in Spanish. I was trying to contrast, what I used to do as a kid versus what I do now. Yeah, sorry, it's pretty, I feel like it's small. So I give them, I used to do this, I do it now, right? And then it's pre-conjugated for them in the conversation. We do lots of input where I ask them to show understanding either through multiple choice or draw it, like a Nearpod draw it, where I give them a sentence and they draw the sentence, like tons of input on that. And then it works its way because I pre-conjugated the verb for that. Also, I'm just using I, like I'm asking them what they did. I'm not asking them what anybody else did. So I'm not only giving them the I form. This is another example. This is an example of a French conversation scaffold. And because I'm not working back from some kind of verb conjugation, I actually just I had this conversation with a native speaker, and then I took notes on what actually was said. And what you'll notice about this is like, it's not from a linguistic perspective, it's not that simple. But when I taught this, it doesn't matter because the kids are learning this language in, basically they're doing the language in they're learning it, they're acquiring it as chunks. So it doesn't matter how complex the structures are, right? And then on the back, I used to hand this out back in real times on a big, thick piece of paper. And on the back are things they can plug in, right? And the idea is by giving the conversation scaffold, they would work with this conversation scaffold first as input, like doing whatever you use your input technique, which is maybe you tell a story with it, or they draw it, or the whiteboards where they're not producing it. They're just showing they understand it and then gradually working it into the conversation and then gradually working away from the conversation scaffold to when in this particular conversation happened with a native speaker. So I brought native speakers in and they have it, and the native speakers didn't know about the scaffold, right? So it allowed the kids to sound a little bit more native-like without worrying about any of the structures behind it. All right, so I want to, because you guys already have a lot of ideas, I'd like us to gather those ideas, and I can publish this Kahoot and all the ideas from it. I'll drop it in the Google Drive so we can get back to it. Because I'm already seeing a lot of ideas. All right, we've got 6 ideas coming in. You're going to get a chance to vote on these ideas. All right, so provide scaffolding, multiple opportunities to speak. Yeah, common constructions, like using the common constructions as input. So that's a really good point. Because especially like students tend to make the same errors. So using the errors and then turning around and putting them in the input for the next week's instruction. Yeah, okay, that's great. That's flashcards, having them just work with the input, continue to work with the input. Okay, that's great. All right, so scaffolds. This is an example again of a scaffold with OneNote or any kind of notes they can click through. Yeah, I feel like this is super small.
So someone wrote a thing in the chat.
Oh,
A brainstorm.
Oh no, okay, that's great. Use authentic text to showcase specific phrasing and structures. Yes, when they want to speak about the topic. That's a great strategy because you can use the authentic text to kind of mine it for words and the like. All right. So here's another thing they do. And this one bugs me more. I know for most teachers, having them, this one bugs me more. It's students add words that shouldn't be there. Like, it's like yo, like in Spanish, they keep saying yo, which like native speakers are not going to use, like native speakers would say juego, basketball, right? In a lot of settings. And the US speakers tend to overuse that. They add extra words in that you don't need. And this one's actually trickier to get at. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard because it's a non-example.
Exactly.
I notice it more in Spanish.
I can't thinking back.
And the reason why I feel like they do it in Spanish is we taught them to conjugate the verbs. And so they go through the yo to get the verb. Whereas if you just teach them the pre-conjugated verb, yeah. Oh yeah, I'm seeing examples. Me bebo agua. Right. So let's take a look there. Yeah. So right. In Japanese, very naturally use subject pronouns. Yeah, exactly. So this is tricky because remember, language acquisition is not just what's the native-like construction. It's also the words that shouldn't be there. And the negative, this is actually harder to get at. So here's an example. Again, it's the same strategy. It's a scaffold in Spanish that's like pre-conjugated with the subjunctive for the kids. Okay. And it's also just the we form because that's all they need. They're saying, because in this topic, it's from the Wayside Publishing thing. The essential question is, what is it about Latin American communities that make them better at focusing on sustainable communities? Like, what are the cultural values that support sustainable communities? And what surprised me about this topic, it's from the Wayside book, is that the kids were super excited about the topic. They're very motivated to talk about this topic. And I can't exactly say what's connecting with them about it, but they have a lot to say about it. And because it's meaning-based, the other piece that we've looked at, like for instance, the previous unit was on healthy eating and what does healthy eating look like in different cultures. And in my class, I have I only have 3 white kids in my class. I have kids from all over the world and different cultures. I have kids from China, from Korea, from India, but the Indian kids don't share a common language, don't share a common culture. So they all had very different experiences about this. So empowering them to do this, what I found when I did this was it upped their accuracy a lot, because they don't have to go through the conjugation stage, and they have to go right to the word they need. And then eventually they get off the scaffold and are able to do it independently. And then the other thing is doing a huge input flood based on the essential question, meaning, and what's cool about Kahoot is if I go to Kahoot and I search in Spanish the term sustainable communities, I get a bunch of Kahoots from Colombia. I get Kahoots from Bolivia. I get Kahoots that are designed for native speakers, so they're actually authentic input that I can then use with my class as an input flood. The other thing, so here's an example of what I mean by an input flood. So I'm making a statement that is using the structure the way that it is more native-like, and then I just have the kids react, like, how much do you agree with this? Like, do you agree with this a little, a lot? Or I give them a whole bunch of statements and I ask them to rank them in order of importance. Because is recycling more important than eliminating food waste? And asking them to give input. So they're focusing on the meaning, but by focusing on the meaning, they're getting an input event. Core values, yes. So talking about the core, did somebody have something to say? I'm not used to the raise hand feature in this. I'd love to hear from somebody else if you have something to say. So the core values, this is interesting. This was from an article about core values in Latin America. And it's interesting to compare with American core values. So one of the American core values is individualism, self-reliance. I guess I'm talking about white America there, but it's definitely, part of our dominant culture. So comparing that to Latin American culture, and then what out of these core values actually supports the concept of sustainable communities. And what's interesting is even the concept of a sustainable community is not really a thing in US culture. So why is it even a thing in Latin America? And what's interesting, picking out of this, I don't think solidarity would be a huge core value in US dominant culture. So comparing the core values, and what happens is because you're focusing on the meaning, it becomes a meaning event rather than a drill event, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. And the kids love the authentic videos on this. The other technique is structured input. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, structured input, but I didn't learn about it until very late in my career. It's where you take a bare bones sentence and the structure you want them to focus on is the only way to make the meaning. Like they can't use any other words to make the meaning. And then the student has to make a choice to show they understand. And the other piece is you make the structure salient, you make it super visible so that the kids are linking the meaning to the structure. So this technique actually has been researched a lot, and it's also been replicated in the research that actually works. Now, I understand this graphic is super academic, so let me show you what I mean. So here's an example at let's say at an intermediate level. So the question is who? This question here is who? And then you have to choose, this is me, this is my Bitmoji. Am I talking about myself? Am I talking about my pet toucan? Or am I talking about us as a class? Okay, and then I make a statement, very simple statement, like that could apply to anybody. Like, what's this in? Como chocolate. And then based on what I said, like anybody, obviously this toucan likes chocolate. We know he likes chocolate, so it could be him. But you have to listen to the verb form to know which one I'm talking about. Okay. If I'm doing it in writing, I make the verb bold. So, I really want to draw attention to the kids, and I'm doing it with listening too. So I'm not distorting what I'm saying, but I'm gonna, chunk what I'm saying so they can really hear it. I try to put it at the beginning of the sentence, which is easy in Spanish because I just say the verb in the beginning. In French, it's a little bit harder, but you can kind of fake it. And I'm sure in other languages, like if I'm focusing on word order, the way I'm going to do it is I may have like a beginning sentence and then they have to choose the way it ends, somehow forcing them to listen to the structure for meaning so that they can have a meaning event and then get it in their brain. All right, here's another one. Students just choose the wrong word. They out and out choose the wrong word. So this one's supposed to say, I support voting rights, but they use the wrong word. Like they just out and out chose the wrong word because it looked similar to English. And so that's what they chose. So what's an example? Just word choice. This is an actual example from our immersion program. These kids have been studying Spanish for 10 years, and this is a mistake they made after 10 years of immersion. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and flip them up. See what we got. Oh, yeah. Yeah, some of those are bad. Yes. I'm seeing. Yeah, there's surprisingly a lot of these. And I can tell you guys are super experienced teachers because you have definitely seen it all. This is the fingernails on the chalkboard thing to me. And we all have our own pet peeves, right? Like some people don't like it when they misconjugate verbs. This to me is my little pet peeve. So what do we do about this? Unfortunately, the fix is input, more input. So when they keep making it, when they keep making the error, then you take their error and you recycle it back to the input, which unfortunately means after you've taught the same level for many years, you know what errors they're going to make. So you can kind of anticipate it. But when you're teaching a new level like me, I'm like, every week I have to go back, pull out these errors, recycling it into the input, which is, I know, a lot of work because I haven't taught Spanish 3 before. But it's worth it because the kids it does start to eliminate this error over time is what I'm seeing. Okay, technology for input. This is my section on technology, and we have many people wiser than me on this call, so I'm sure they have other ideas, which is why I'd like to have a support group for this, because I think we could learn a lot from each other. The Nearpod Draw It, I like Nearpod Draw It a lot. Pear Deck has this thing where they drag for their opinions. I really like that. And the Kahoot content quizzes, like I told you about before, where I just steal something from another class, like an elementary class, and I steal it and use it in my Spanish class. It's super good. And that's a time saver because that's already done. Also, does anybody know about this? You guys probably do. I just discovered it, but it's called Vocabulary Factory on Pear Deck. Kathleen, have you used it? Okay. Has anybody else used it? Can you give me a thumbs up? I'm looking at your little squares. Vocabulary. Kathleen, would you be willing to tell me about your experience with it?
I played around with it because I'm trying to figure out how to make, it adjust towards language more than just SEL type things. And the kids were really into this idea of having the different boxes. And do you have one of yours up there?
I do. I've got some screenshots. I did it live, so I was experimenting. And so the way it is, they get these nights, it's really funny because they get in the shifts and they're going to illustrate the vocabulary. So I took some screenshots while I was also teaching, which is hard because I'm also trying to teach, but this is what I came up with. Here's an example. It was so funny because the cards drop down. They have to illustrate the card and give an example. And so the cards would drop down. And then here's one of mine.
Isn't that, that's what we do. That is the most popular one right there.
Yeah. And it's like, oh my God, these kids were like, so this is my actual class here. You can see what they came up with. It's pretty good. It's like the world around you, the nature is around you, so they gave an example and it was fun. And then here's the fun thing. You approve it or disapprove it. And the stamp comes down. The kids really like this. And then here's the chat from my class. I'll just let you read what they said about this. They were they were laughing so much about this. They thought it was so cool. These drawings are so bad because I find these drawings so funny. So it's just so they really like this. They enjoyed it. And then after they do the drawings, it spins it off into GimKit. So then you can have them practice it in GimKit. Okay, another example is a disregard for short words or words that carry little meaning. And so that's like la mapa, which, they don't care the gender. And immersion kids really don't care. They're like el mapa, la mapa, who cares, right? And you can explain to them, oh, but this is like a Latin or Greek, I don't remember the rule, but you can explain it to them. They just do not care. So, how do we get them to sound better? Because it does, they don't sound native like when they do that. So the bad news is there ain't much we can do about it. We just have to, one of my teachers called Bill Van Patten back when he was doing his podcast, and he was live on, and he said, what do I do with my native speakers that still do this? Like my heritage speakers. And he's like, you be patient. That's what you do. You're patient. And that's kind of the bad news about that. But here's the feedback. I want to share the feedback. Capri are going to reenact the feedback because I am finding feedback doesn't have an immediate effect, but it has a positive effect. So after they do something, I send them feedback in the chat in Teams. So your definition is very thorough. Notice me, a native speaker, I misspell thorough. I appreciate your precision of your ideas. You're knowledgeable on the topic of sustainable cities. I share your concern about garbage.
Thank you.
I've been dreaming of a 3D printer that would use plastic recyclables as ink.
Oh, that's a good idea. I think it's possible if you're able to convert recyclables into ink through like an extraction process somehow. That would be really cool to research.
If only I could have a second career as an engineer.
Wink emoji. Never too late to try something new. Smile emoji.
So this is an outside of class conversation, obviously. It's not happening in Spanish, but it is definitely building a community with me and the student. And it's a good sample of how excited my students are about this topic compared to, say, the topic of, what color is your shirt? I guess I'm blind, so I have to say that the wayside topics are really upping the game for everybody. Here's another example. And this one, I typed it while I was teaching, so forgive how stupid it sounds. Excelente con el vocabulario.
Muchas gracias.
Pronuncias las palabras con claridad. Expresas tus ideas con claridad.
Gracias por las regionales. I can't speak Spanish.
Keep going.
I can't. ¿Qué puedo hacer para improver más?
Try pronouncing the letter E as A, like in K. Sometimes it drifts a little.
That's great feedback. I'll definitely keep that in mind. Thank you.
So that's an example of, my kids are constantly chatting me. And I've told them that I do turn my chat off on Sundays for boundaries, but they like they love the feedback, which surprised me because I've read the research on feedback, but I'm like, what kind of feedback can I give them on language acquisition? Because you just have to get more in your brain. But any little feedback I can give them, they eat it up. They love it. And they like the fact it's individualized. Now, you're thinking, I have 150 students. How am I going to write 150 little bits of individualized feedback? Well, here's how. I have like 5 or 6 common feedback I'm giving to students. And then once in a while, I'll customize it. And I just copy and paste in the chat individually. So it feels individual to them. But for me, it actually, basically, if I assign anything, I tell them why. It's either because I'm assessing you or because I'm going to use it for feedback. Or on occasion, I just don't have the capacity to give them feedback. I say, okay, this is your individualized practice. So you're going to have to give yourself feedback, or you're going to have to give each other feedback. So, and what I've noticed is, because as we know, I'm an all online teacher, getting kids to engage online is super challenging. You guys, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, right? So the individual engagement strategies, like on Teams, when they're a little circle, I click on their little circle and I get direct chat to that one kid. And if the kid's not in a Nearpod, I click on a circle and say, hey, dude, you're not in a Nearpod. Here's a link. Looking forward to seeing you on the Nearpod. And they're like, oh, she sees me. She's noticed. And then it has upped my level of engagement substantially by going that direction. All right. So as we're moving towards the end, this is my daughter. I briefly introduced her at the beginning. She's a heritage speaker of French. Her dad's from Belgium. She's a heritage speaker of French. She went a couple years to the French immersion school, but wasn't really educated in French. And she resembles a lot of the heritage speakers that we have in our classes. And so I thought it would be great to get her to contribute her perspective.
Yeah, so basically as a heritage speaker of French, I'm like terrible at spelling, but I'm very good at understanding and speaking and, that kind of stuff. And I'm taking a French class right now. I'm taking French 203, going to take 204 next semester because apparently I'm crazy. But one thing I've noticed about college French teachers that has been very different than any language teacher I've had in high school or middle school is that they're so focused on grammar. And the thing is, I can do it when I'm not thinking about it. Like, using the forms like lui, les miens, like that kind of stuff is kind of already in my brain. So I use it like naturally while speaking. But then what I've noticed is when my French teacher is like, oh, you're supposed to use it for this and for this. So when I'm working on an assignment, I'm thinking back, like, oh, what kind of situation is this? Is this a direct pronoun? Blah, blah, blah. It actually makes it like 10 times harder for me to actually understand it. And I end up getting it wrong so often just because I'm like thinking about it so hard, It's like I'm overthinking it. Whereas if I just like said it without thinking, it would have been right on the first try. So that's been my personal experience in my French class. And it's like the thing I like most is when we break out into small groups and I get to talk with students in French, individually in French, because there isn't so much of a focus on structure there. It's like, it's just, spontaneous speaking. And that's really easy for me as a native speaker, because that's basically what I've been doing all my life is speaking in French, not really focusing on any of the structures or grammar like explicitly. So, that's what I've noticed.
Well, and the truth is the fix for you, because so I'm a French teacher, right? So it does bug me. I'm not going to lie. That's why I call this presentation Fingernails on the Chalkboard. So it does get to me, but unfortunately the fix for that is you need to read more in French.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sorry, are we having an argument on camera in the middle of a presentation? But it's true. We need you to do more free choice reading in French to kind of, it's challenging because like a lot of our heritage speakers, they don't have academic language. And if they're going to be able to use their language in a professional context, you need to learn that academic language.
Exactly.
But and also I do feel like once you get to the advanced level, it's a good time. I mean, some of my classes, I have kids who are like trilingual, right? And they're little linguists. Like in every class, you have a little linguist. You've got that budding linguist, and that's fine. I give them, if a kid wants the verb conjugation table, I'm happy to give it to them. I think what I'm not doing is making it punitive. Like, I don't put their quiz results of their ability to conjugate verbs in their grade because I'm focusing on the can-do statements and how well they can do those, because grading's become a huge issue. Because it's kind of an equity issue. And I know I'm still struggling with that. Like, how do I grade in a way that's equitable, that values what the kid brings? But let's be honest, they need to level up. So getting them to level up is super important. Before I give my final thoughts, I'm wondering what is percolating for you? Is anybody willing to speak up about, what they're thinking about now?
All right, I'll say something. Bouncing off your last point about, the grammar versus the communicative aspect. I've had a couple students in my classes who were the budding linguists who really, really wanted to learn the grammar and, who were ready to have a conversation about morphology. And in the very, very, very beginning stages of, the first week and month of, level 1 novice, when they are just parroting, those kids are spiraling because they don't understand how the words work. And you just have, and I remember just being like, it's okay, just repeat after me, like, o genki desu ka, blah, 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 blah. Because even the novice level, with Japanese, I don't want to get into a whole conversation about saying the way you say I like something in Japanese was just something we do right away in level 1, I like anime, You're using the copula verb in Japanese. You don't even say like as a verb. It's I am anime, like is the noun. and so halting the class to explain all of that would have just been but later on, when the students get more advanced, I think it's good to have some resources where you can point them and be like, hey, if you really want to go in depth into the morphological and syntactical rules of Japanese, just, go to tofugu.com or something or whatever. And, be a grammaticist to your heart's content.
Yeah, I guess that's just my concern is let's not use it punitively. Let's use it as a support for some kids. And I actually did in French 1 and 2. I had this student at Interlake when I was teaching French 1 and 2. She actually acquired the past tense. She came to me. She constructed the past tense verb table based on just the input she was hearing me say, because I taught all in French. And she's like, I think this is the past tense. And then in French 2, she came to me and said, I think this is the imperfect, or I think that's what I'm hearing. Is this what I'm hearing? But she was one kid out of 100, right? so that's part of it. So I just want to leave you. Thank you, by the way, Elena. I appreciate that. And I guess I want to leave you with this final thought. We just need to embrace the intermediate speaker as super messy. They're messy. And that's actually part of the glory, right? Because they're creating with language. And, kind of turn off our ear for that and just keep going at the input, keep trying to support them. And unfortunately, if you're a teacher, a K-12 teacher, these kids, you don't see the advanced speaker because they've left you and gone on. But I actually had a student I taught in 2nd grade 20 years ago find me on Facebook. And she said to me, do you remember when you taught me in 2nd grade? I'm like, no, but sure, I'm sure I did teach you in 2nd grade back when I was a specialist. She said, well, I had such a love for Spanish in your class that I became a social worker in Arizona, and I use Spanish every day. So you never know, they're going to leave you and go off into the world and do amazing, great things. So we're just going to have to, I like that. Be as sweet with learners as you are with the little ones starting to talk. Yes, Catherine. We show baby videos and remind them they're learning. So again, in partnership, I definitely want to start a support group though, because I definitely could use you guys' expertise as I'm planning my lesson. So I'll talk to Lynn about that. I'm going to send you off to your next session. Thanks for joining me today. Love you guys.